Hello everybody, it's week 8. We have a couple things to talk about with our pie graphs, that last graph that we learned how to make, and then we're going to see if we can put all these things together and figure out how to be creators of graphs and trying to tell a story with those graphs. Alright, so open up your week 8 folder. We're in Monday and Tuesday's folder, and we're watching Monday's lesson, so this is where you are. The slides that I'm going to use are here. If the video doesn't show, you can click the link. Great. So, without further ado, actually, you know what? That would work better if you click this little button down here in the corner. But I am going to open them up here. All right. So we're going to continue this question of how can data and graphs be used to tell my story, right? If I'm a data person or a creator using media and my particular media is graphs, I can tell the story that I want to tell instead of the story that the numbers tell. And so we're going to be looking closely at pie graph to see how people use those to misinform instead of inform. So here's our first one. It's case 5. In this case, we're looking at causes of death in 2013, and you'll notice that this is a 3D graph. All right, so based on this graph, what's the leading cause of death? All right, if I were to cover this up, you might not remember, but it looks like the blue one is the biggest chunk. It's 31% with cancer. And actually, heart disease is the most lethal thing for 2013. Well, why does 32 look bigger than 31? Well, in this case, it's because the graph's creator decided to make a 3D graph. And it's not clear if this person did it intentionally, but an unintentional consequence of the choice they made is that when you look at it, your eye takes in this edge, which makes it seem like it has more surface area than the heart disease, which is 32%. The other thing is, when you're looking at a graph in 3 dimension, things that are further away from you tend to look smaller than things that are closer to you. So the way that they've oriented this graph makes the heart disease look smaller. So I can show you that by going into Keynote. Let me go up here. If I rotate this graph, I can make it seem like that. So now heart disease definitely looks bigger than cancer, right? The other thing that I can do is I can rotate things. So if I go into my wedges, I believe it's this one. Oh, it's behind my camera. If I rotate this around, you can see how the graph changes a little bit. So now this red one, which is 7%, looks a whole lot bigger than it did before. Right? So 3D graphs, while they look cool, aren't always the best tool for us to use. And why is that? Well, let's go back in here and look real quick. Right? Pie wedges are distorted because when you do 3 dimension, it takes into account the fact that things that are further away from you get smaller and the edge gets added into the size of the wedge. The next thing that we have to pay attention to with pie graphs is that the labels are important. I can use a label to misguide you, right? So let's look at this graph. Is there anything wrong with it? I see a title, some wedges, some labels. So this is arena funding. So I guess this is how we're paying for a new arena. And it looks like about half the graph, the yellow, is from the city. It's 265 million. And this red chunk is unknown, 10 million. The blue chunk, AEG, for 50 million. And the green chunk is Maloof's for 85 million. Anything wrong with this? If you noticed that 10 million, 50 million, and 85 million are represented as the same size, then you'd be correct. If you noticed that this yellow chunk is 50%, but 265 seems like a little bit more than 50%, you would also be correct. So it's really important, 1, that these wedges be accurate, and 2, that they actually add up to 100%. Well, this graph doesn't even show us the percents. So there's all kinds of stuff going on with this. If we were to do the math and sit down and do the percentages, we'd find that 265 million is actually more like 65%, and that 10 million is more like 2%. So this graph is all kinds of wrong, right? So remember, when you're looking at pie graphs, the wedges actually have to add up to 100 because a pie graph is supposed to show you parts of a whole. If they don't add up to 100, then they're not showing you the whole, right? The second thing is that the labels need to be accurate so that you actually know what you're supposed to be looking at, because your eye wants to use that visual data instead of the written data. All right, so your task is to go into Schoology, and you're going to go into the assignment called DME Deceptive Data Part 6. You've watched the lesson. Now you're going to open up the attachments, and there's the graph. You're going to send that to Keynote. If you want, there's written instructions here for you if you prefer that. You're going to correct the two graphs, and you're going to turn it in.